Hello, everyone. Good morning. Bonjour. Buenos dias. Ciao a tutti. I'm not going to try to say it in all language. Ohio, maybe Japanese. That's as far as I will go. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to join our webinar about accelerating cyber resilience initiative. So I'm joined today by a regular invite from GRC 2020, the great Michael Rasmussen, the GRC pundit, well known to everyone who's working on GRC because he basically built the GRC concept back in Forrester in 22, if I remember correctly, Michael. And it's a pleasure to have you in our webinar today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for connecting all the way down to Milwaukee from where I'm located, Paris. So my name is Cyril Amblard. I'm the GRC Product Marketing at Mega. And today we're going to discuss some very interesting topic about cyber resilience with Michael. So we'll have lots of insight for you guys who are connected and some practical tips, especially if you're embarking on this, I would say, perilous journey that is cyber resilience. So we'll have a quick introduction, which is what we're basically doing now. And we'll cover the cyber resilience imperative and the path to cyber resilience, as well as the challenges that comes with the cyber resilience, and also why you need a connected approach to tackle this beast that is cyber resilience. So without further ado, I'm going to start the presentation with a few words that maybe you know. I will start with a big quotation from the World Economic Forum, which basically stated that 2023 was a big year for cybercrime, which is an interesting quote. I don't know what you think, Michael, about this quote.
I think that it definitely is, and cybercrime and enforcement. We're seeing a lot of focus on enforcement around the world, and in that context, legal liability and exposure. I mean, there's so much we can unpack on this. I mean, cybercrime, the World Economic Forum makes this particular statement here, but to me, it's so much more than that, because we have a lot going on accountability, like the accountability regimes. Like a year ago, TSB Bank was fined £30 million for a third-party risk failure, but the CIO under UK SMCR was fined £80,000 that the chief information officer had to pay out of his bank account for that third-party risk failure. So we have this whole idea of resilience and security and cybercrime and cyber risk and things. And there's nuances in some of these terms too, because in the United States, North America, we see a lot of terminology like on IT risk management, but in Europe, that word cyber is more strong. And so we talk about cyber risk and cyber resilience. But we're also seeing that I mentioned accountability, like with TSB Bank, but also in the U.S., this past year, the SolarWinds chief information security officer is being investigated for fraudulent statements on security based on their security breach. And so there's a lot happening, not just on the crime element, but on cyber risk accountability and regulation, and so much happening right here.
And that's a very good segue to this illustration that we are showing now, because as you mentioned, it's just much broader than just cybercrime. And 2023 was a big year for cybercrime. But if you look at the other figures from other institutions around the world, well, 2024, 2025, 2026, even 2027 are going to be big predicted years for cybercrime. And when you see those, exponential cost of cybercrime worldwide, what's your feeling about it? Is this a losing battle that that companies are facing against cybercrime?
Losing battle. That's a very tough challenge, because it's an ongoing, continuous battle. So in one respects, we never really get ahead of it, but we're almost sort of treading water on it. So I hate to say that we're losing because I think there's areas where organizations are doing well, but it's not stagnant, that's for sure. And that's part of the challenge, that it's completely evolving, changing, adapting. And even where it hasn't adapted, we're still seeing old methods. I mean, you look at the huge MGM hack. What was that, last fall, early fall? And it was basically a social engineering attack. I mean, that goes back to the 1980s and like the movie War Games and Kevin Mitnick, and so we're still dealing with some of those same things. And so losing battle, yes, or I could also say treading water. That
treading water would be more appropriate.
But we're not getting in front of it and ahead of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, what was staggering is the number of cyber attacks per day. I mean, 2,200 or one cyber attack 39 seconds. So I make the calculation that by the end of the webinar, there would have been 92 cyber attacks while we speak, Michael, on different type of organization, which is mind-blowing, if I must say.
Yep. Most definitely.
And then if you look at, I know that you cite, you use a lot the IBM and Ponemon Institute, which is basically giving you the global average cost of a data breach, which is now 4.45 million. It's plus 15% over 3 years. I mean, this is also significant. It's no longer trivial when you have, a cyber attack or when you have a data breach. Now it costs significant money.
Yeah. And there's a lot to unpack in the study that IBM and the Ponemon Institute do, because that cost can significantly go down when you automate cyber risk, cyber security, privacy with solutions out there. And so there's a lot of interesting data when you unpack it to the depths of the value of automation of risk and compliance processes. It doesn't eliminate it. We still have risk, and we will always have risk. And I think that's one of the things that we have to deal with cybercrime, is that there's always going to be risk. And I started my career in the 1990s, focused on IT risk and IT security. And I had this whole mindset that, we had to eliminate vulnerabilities. And the reality is, some vulnerabilities we just have to accept, because if we're not vulnerable, we're not in business anymore. Judge Mervyn Keane said, business is the undertaking of risk for reward. He's a luminary from South Africa on corporate governance. My favorite quote is Captain James T. Kirk of the USS Starship Enterprise. He's got, in season 2, episode 20 of the original series, he's got this risk committee in this room, where the executive committee with Bones and McCoy and Spock, Bones, McCoy, Spock. Oh, gosh, who am I missing? Scotty. And they're trying to figure out, do they go on this mission? And Captain James T. Kirk says, risk is our business. That's what this starship's all about. And every organization has risk. Are we just taking the right risks, and what's our exposure? And so we have to balance that, because just being in business and having a presence out there in the world, particularly a cyber presence, means that there's going to be some risk. But how do we manage that risk and mitigate that risk appropriately?
And what's interesting is that cybersecurity, have been for long considered as an IT subject, but now we can see that it's coming up also as a number one risk for auditors and internal controllers and even risk managers. So it has become also now it's a business issue. It's no longer just IT.
Yeah. And in fact, I find part of the challenge that we have in this area is, how do we communicate cybersecurity in a way that the board and executives understand? I was working with a firm out of the Middle East. I was sitting down with them in their office in Dubai in January, and they do bow tie risk assessments. And they told me that the board, cyber risk, cybersecurity used to fly over their head. They didn't understand it, but as soon as they presented the visual of a bow tie risk on cyber risk, the board says, "Oh, I actually see what you're saying now," because it's visually laid out there on, you have the cyber risk in the middle there, whatever that risk we're measuring is, and then on the one side of the bow tie, you've got how this risk can materialize and all the controls in place, and on the other side of the bow tie, how this risk can, when it does happen, becomes an incident, all the controls to mitigate the exposure. And as soon as they laid it out visually, the board got it and wants more bow ties of this area. But sometimes we have to. You're completely right that cyber risk is an issue for internal controllers and auditors, but it's also a discussion at the board and executive level. And part of our challenge is how do we communicate and engage in cyber risk in terms and in visuals and reports that are meaningful to them, that they can understand, that don't overwhelm them.
True. That's an enormous challenge. And when we spoke to clients, that's their biggest challenge, is how do you make the vision of IT and the vision of business coincide? And this is something that we will try to answer during this webinar. What's interesting is that when you look at the number of cyber attacks, when you look at the cost of cyber attack, cybersecurity being the number one, it's true that now the regulators are taking this subject very, very seriously. And you have a lot of, I call it the rise of global cyber resilience regulation around the world, because it has become a major subject, especially for financial institutions, because all financial institutions are interconnected. Trading venues are interconnected. So if you have a cyber attack on one of the major players, it can cascade into a domino impact. And of course, we don't want that, and the regulators don't want that. So you have a lot of regulation that are popping up, just like the EU DORA, so Digital Operational Resiliency Act in Europe, the FCA PRA Operational Resilience in the UK, the OCC Sound Practice for Cyber Resilience in the US, as well as the SEC Cybersecurity Risk Management Strategy, Governance and Incident Disclosure. That's a mouthful. But also in India, with the Reserve Bank of India, they have a Master Direction on Information Technology. In Australia, they have the APRA CPS 234. And here I'm going to throw the ball at you, Michael, because obviously you cover all those regions. You travel a lot during your GRC presentation and GRC conference. I mean, are all those regulation tackling cyber resilience the same way, or do you see differences between the way the regulators approaches cyber resilience by region?
Yeah, there's definitely differences by region and focus. And that focus might even vary. I mean, in the EU, you do mention DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, but you also have the EU Cyber Resilience Act. You've got NIS2, and there's a lot of broad focus on different aspects of cyber resilience and cyber risk throughout Europe. And it's just not DORA, but DORA is the one that's getting a lot of focus right now because of the January 2025 deadline. Yep. For that. It impacts financial services and all those firms supporting financial services. But it is the Digital Operational Resilience Act, so it's focused on the digital cyber elements as they impact the organization, while the United Kingdom's PRA FCA Operational Resilience Guideline is broad. It's not just cyber resilience, it's operational resilience, including the cyber resilience aspect. And I'm dealing with a French insurance firm right now. And their big question is, how do we harmonize these? How do we harmonize the breadth of the UK's operational resilience, which it really isn't deep and detailed, but it's broad, and with the EU DORA, which is more narrow in focus, but very deep and detailed. And how do we bring that together? And then, in Australia, you mentioned CPS 234, that's more focused on cyber resilience aspect. Yes. Of course, you have the broader aspect of CPS 230, which is the operational risk and resilience standard too. That's broader. And so you've got those areas. And then, as you mentioned, the OCC Sound Practice for Cyber Resilience. And then the OCC has just recently come out and mentioned that there's going to be greater regulation, not just guidance, but actual regulation on operational resilience in the U.S. And of course, you've got the SEC and things like the Rule 30 that requires member firms to have written policies and procedures to address the administrative, technical, physical safeguards for protection of personal records, personal information. And I already mentioned NIS2 out there, which is the directive in the EU on broad cross-industry focus on cybersecurity. And so there's so much happening at us and coming at us right now. And resilience is one aspect of this. And then part of that resilience is being security and managing security elements to make us more resilient. But beyond resilience, we also need agility. We need the ability to see what's coming at the organization. Resilience, by definition, is that recovery from an event. And I like the UK's operational resilience definition because it's the only one that talks about preventing events, not just recovering rapidly from events. And that prevention requires agility. How do we forecast what's coming at the organization for cyber resilience? And how do we prepare the organization for that? So that agility is absolutely important, that we not just looking at what's happening now, but we're looking ahead to see what's coming at the organization from regulations, from cyber risks and things that can impact the business and disrupt the business.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I mean, there are so many regulations also coming up, and I'm just going to make a little comment here. I mean, if you want to have a good source of information of how those regulations can impact the business, and to have some inside information, I would recommend that you connect to the grcreport.com. Michael, I believe you're behind this great website with lots of resources for GRC professionals around regulation, but also best practice for risk management and controls. Can you just tell quickly how we can access this website and how is it powered?
Certainly. I mean, I have the one hat, which is my analyst hat with grc2020.com, and 2020 being vision, not the year 2020, like perfect vision.
Yeah.
And that's my analyst role, covering all the solutions, like the great solutions like Mega out there in the market. But then I'm also the CEO of the grcreport.com. And that's the global news source on governance, risk, and compliance around the world by geographies, by type of risk area, whether it's information security, cyber risk is one category, ESG is another, and corporate compliance and ethics, and third-party risk, and all these things. But there's an intersection of all that. But it's a global news source on the news developments, and we've already passed 200 articles in 2024 alone. And last year there's more, of course, but lots of articles on global news on governance, risk, and compliance.
Okay, so go to the grcreport.com. Easy, it's free, and you can download a lot of information and read all about GRC. And just for our audience who is connected, that would be interesting if you could put in the chat where you are located. So I don't know whether you're in the US or in Latin America or in Europe, and whether you are impacted by those regulations. So if you can just type in the chat, "Hello, I'm in Belgium. I'm impacted by DORA," or if you don't know if you're impacted, just say where you are located. That would be interesting to see where our global reach today in terms of audience, because we have people connected from all over the world. One thing also I wanted to highlight, which is very interesting, is taken also from the World Economic Forum, and here I'm going to zoom because it's a little bit too tiny. So basically, the World Economic Forum, they ask risk professionals if cyber regulation are perceived to be an effective method or reducing risk. What's interesting to see is that in 2022, only 39.2% were thinking that this is an effective method. And if you compare it to what the difference 2 years makes, it's a 60.4%. When I look at those figures, I have the impression that even if regulation is always seen as a burden, and you always have to comply, and you're doing it really because you don't want to avoid being being hit by a regulator or being hit by a fine. Here, I have the impression that with cyber resilience, there is a willingness also by the professionals to to have guidance, and that this guidance can be provided by regulation. What's your thought on this figure, Michael? I don't know if you knew this or.
Well, the proof is in how organizations are acting. I mean, we do not have very strong, broad cyber risk regulation happening in the United States. There's pockets of it, as I mentioned. Europe with the EU DORA and Cyber Resilience Act and NIS2 and country-specific stuff, and there's so much going on. And right now, I'm seeing that RFPs and things for technology and strategies, and where organizations are re-architecting, that there's a lot more activity happening in Europe because the regulations are driving it. And it's much more of a business perspective too, and not just a compliance exercise. And so, where there's a lot coming out of Europe, I'm seeing a lot more activity and focus on this than I am in North America. But in North America, there's still activity, but it's not the same robust pace that we're seeing in the in and across Europe, not just the EU, but even the UK and things.
Yeah. While you were speaking, I was looking also at the people who put their comment in the chat. Well, we have mostly people from Europe, from the Netherlands, from Spain, from Hungary, from Italy, from France also. So yeah, DORA is obviously a very hot topic in Europe. So if we try to break down the cyber resilience, why there is a need for cyber resilience, well, we can say there are maybe three big buckets of challenges. The first one, which is very obvious, which is, organization needs to protect themselves against cyber attack. They need also to be able, in case if they are hit by a cyber attack, to maintain their operation and to restore their operation. And they need obviously to manage their cyber incidents. So that's the increasing cyber menace. And on top of that, you have a double effect, which is the increasing cyber regulation. As we have seen, you have a lot more and more regulation around cyber. So you need to ensure compliance with those cyber regulation, because you don't want to, have damage, financial and reputational damage. You need also to provide evidence to the regulator that you're following this governance. And where I would like to have your opinion on, Michael, is the last bit, which when we speak to clients, when we speak to consultants, they say that there is a need for, I mentioned that into Cyber Alliance, which is that you need to mobilize all the stakeholders, so IT and the business around cyber resilience. And it's sometimes hard to synchronize cyber risk management with the business goal of the organization, because they are all working in different departments. They are, sometimes not working under the same, not sometimes, but all the time, not working under the same, using the same tools, same taxonomy. So it's hard to get this sync and then to have a cyber posture that is efficient. I don't know if this is something also that you see when you speak to clients about cyber resilience, that you have this dichotomy between the IT and cyber and the operation side of things.
Yeah, there's been this, dichotomy where they've been split, but they have to cooperate, because the reality is business depends on IT and depends on all these cyber resilience aspects to be able to operate the business. I mean, you even go back to the Target breach from 10 years ago. Yeah. The doorway that was a network connection that, that for an HVAC vendor, heating and air conditioning vendor, had to connect to the Target network for environmental monitoring. I mean, that's more like physical building operations. And there's one of the largest data breaches in history because of an HVAC vendor, a heating and air conditioning vendor. Those little things matter, and everything's connected. I mean, we had the breach in a casino where there was a thermometer in a fish tank with the Internet of Things. Things are being deployed. They're throughout the business. We've got IT systems like Shadow IT and now Shadow AI being used. And, information technology, software, it's pervasive. It supports every aspect of the business. And it all impacts the organization's cyber resilience and risk exposure on how we manage and monitor that. And it's not something that can be just buried in the bowels and depths of IT anymore. It needs to be a collaborative, engaged effort across the business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And when we look at if we try to sum up in two buckets, what's the business and the IT view, considering, regarding cyber resilience, well, we can see that there is a lots of different departments that are part of this cyber resilience. First is the board, obviously, because they need to get a reliable assessment of cyber risk. Their main goal is to protect the organization, to protect their critical processes, to avoid liability and penalties, and even possibly go to jail in case of non-compliance. And then you have the risk and compliance professional that needs to manage the ICT, so information, communication, and technology risk, ensure business continuity, compliance, report incident, and then you have the data office also that needs to secure the critical data, because that's usually what the cyber attackers are after. And you need to have procurement. You mentioned these third-party breaches via vendors. Well, they need to manage the third-party risk. And then you have the IT side of things, the information technology. They need to identify the critical IT asset that powers those critical processes for the organization. So they need also to map this IT system and the dependency, identify those critical third-party vendors, identify the risks that can impact the IT system and put the necessary controls. And then you have the information security that need to assess the impact of an IT incident. They need also to detect and manage the incidents. They need to manage also the risk, cyber risk. And then you have the audit IT who needs to audit the whole thing. Lots of, different perspective, different view on how to manage cyber resilience. When you see something like that, Michael, what do you think?
Well, it's more than just that aspect of of cyber resilience from the regulations and themes on the left. It's even the broader regulations. Everything impacts. I mean, you look at the EU AI Act, and it's got cyber risk and resilience implications. You look at pretty much any type of regulation out there. There's almost some downstream impact on cyber in some way.
GDPR.
Yeah. And all the data governance, most definitely. But I was teaching my third-party risk management by design workshop in Chicago last month, and I use these micro simulations from a company down in Australia called Illuminar. Great little tabletop scenario planning. They do little videos and makes you think. And it was in two parts. The first part was, and these are fictitious, okay? But the first part was you just got hit with a big modern slavery issue. One of your critical suppliers has modern slavery happening. It's like a big news item all over the news, little video playing out all the issues and challenges. And then what do you do about that? Okay, that's modern slavery. Like France's Duty of Care Act or, the UK Modern Slavery Act, so much there. And then in that context, everybody works on that. But then the second video is because of that modern slavery issue, you just got hacked and by the hacktivist group Anonymous, and your systems are being held with ransomware until you terminate relationships with the supplier. And then everybody has to act. But who would have thought a modern slavery issue could lead to an IT security breach? Now, I mentioned these are fictitious, but in this third-party risk workshop, this large global organizations there said, this is reality. This actually happened to us. And so there you have a modern slavery issue. And as a result of that issue, somebody's actually being held captive with ransomware and a hacktivist type thing, which is a cyber resilience risk issue. Exactly. These things are connected.
That reminds me of the example that sometimes that you share about the during the COVID area when you mentioned that a health and safety risk can turn into obviously an IT risk because you're working from home, you have less security when you're working from your environment. It has also confidentiality issues and all those kind of things. So the interconnection of risk and how to manage this is really key.
Yep.
And basically, what we would like to know is that through our first quick poll is that obviously you have seen that those two sides of the business that can be impacted by cyber resilience, and it will be interesting to know which of those two best describe your role within your organization. So are you more into the IT aspect of the organization, or are you more onto the business aspect of the organization? So here they are. If you're more into the operation, management, risk and compliance, data, procurement, well, business. If you're more into the IT part of things, information security, technology, audit IT, please share IT audits. And we can see from the moment that it's, so I'm looking at the live polls, and it seems that we have more people on the business role than on the IT roles. Well, it's changing. So 85 to 35. Yeah, so it's more business, which is not surprising and which is interesting because that's also going to the stream that we are telling for this webinar, which is basically you need a connected approach. Well, you need to have everyone business and IT working under the same environment and sharing the same perspective. Because if you don't have this, cohesive, holistic view, then it gets very difficult to manage a subject or like cyber resilience, or to manage the interconnection of risk or manage the interconnection of IT with processes. Would you agree, Michael, with that, I would say, bold statement?
No, I would agree.
So what we are seeing when we speak to clients is that, especially when they embark on a compliance project on cyber resilience, let's say for DORA, is that it's a real transformation project. We see that a lot of companies underestimate the effort to get compliant with the regulation. You have seen before that you have a lot of different departments that are impacted by those regulations, and those departments needs to work together. And sometimes they are not accustomed working together. So it's not like, if I take the analogy of the enterprise that Michael used, it's you have a Scotty who is not sharing information with the captain, and the weapon department is not sharing information with also the captain, and you're trying to run a ship with the completely in siloed, and that wouldn't work. Why? Because it impacts, those projects impact the whole organization, from the board to GRC professionals to IT security, data, procurement, legal, who's going to need to draw contracts with the third party, for example, to make sure that they follow compliance on cyber regulation, because they could be audited and held accountable if they don't follow those regulations. It impacts a lot of process, application, portfolio management, risk and compliance, vendor management, incident management, penetration testing, business continuity, obviously, because if you're hit by a cyber attack, you need to have the good business continuity management in place to be able to spring back, as Michael was saying about agility. And all those organization and process, they run on different applications or tools. Some use, IS repository like CMDB. Some use process manager to, model their process. They use GRC software. You can have continuity solution, incident management, cybersecurity solution, data governance solution. And you see that when you have these spaghetti balls of all those applications and processes, it gets very complex to manage to have this bird eye view of your cyber resilience. And when you have to get back to the regulator, if you're hit by a major incident within 24 hours with a full root cause analysis of how the incident occurred, what business process was impacted, it gets very tricky. So when you see this transformation project, do you see things that are missing, Michael, from your experience, or is it true that companies tend to underestimate the effort to tackle those regulations that are very broad?
No, it is a very transformative project. To really do this well, it requires significant understanding of the business and how it operates. You need operational intelligence, and I cover the range of solutions in the market, but this is where Mega really shines and stands out is in your business process modeling and your enterprise architecture. To be truly have a strong focus on cyber risk and cyber resilience requires a detailed understanding of everything you lay out here on how the business operates and what is it dependent upon, from the IT systems, the data, the architecture, to the vendor relationships and services and products and all this. It requires a detailed business understanding to be able to truly be resilient. Any other approach that doesn't involve business process modeling and enterprise architecture for cyber resilience is only half-baked. You really have to have a good understanding of how the business operates. And then if there's disruption, what are our alternative scenarios for running that process or that service, and how do we get it back up and running? And, and it requires a detailed understanding of the business.
And how do you make this? Because we'll sometimes challenge, by customer that they don't see the value of sharing data with another. They don't have, the same, for instance, I don't know, risk scale compared to their counterparts in GRC that are using a scale that is completely offset. They don't share the same process. Also taxonomy. I mean, how do you make this vision a reality? What would be your quick recommendation to activate this vision?
Well, you need to have a really strong future state of what are we trying to build for? And you need somebody that is going to lead this, that has the visibility vertically, like from the board and executives and operational management on down, but also horizontally across the different areas of the business, from procurement and corporate compliance and enterprise operational risk and audit, as well as IT. And so you need that visionary that can have that vertical reach and that horizontal reach and be able to engage on that vision and get other people to participate, and has enough support for them within the business that when there's political barriers and things that they can be overcome.
And that's usually where we get the most traction, is when we have a strong, also, as you mentioned, sponsorship from the board. And it's true that when you look at the financial penalty for miscompliance with the regulation like DORA, and even the financial implication or the enforcement against the management, that's a good incentive to get everyone on board on this cyber resilience journey.
Yep.
So if we wanted to create a perfect short charting course to cyber resilience, these are some quick tips that we put with Michael. And please feel free to ask questions. I forgot to mention that, but you're probably so used to attend to webinars that you know that you can use the question tabs to ask all your questions. So let's say that if we want to chart, this course to cyber resilience, you need first, as Michael was mentioning, to design your framework. That means to identify what are your critical processes and your supporting IT asset and vendors, because those vendors can impact in terms of, cyber attacks. And once you have put this framework in place, you need also to attach risk and controls, and to make sure that the ICT risk and controls are identified. The second step is once you have designed this framework, you need to make sure that this framework actually works. So you need to assess your cyber risk and controls, and launch campaign and self-assessment, and also to have indicators in terms of if you have breaches within your organization, to alert you in case of cyber attack, or if you have breached your risk appetite in some area. But then, of course, things will go wrong. Cyber attacks will happen. So you need plan B, which is basically your resilience strategy. So you need to have documented and tested continuity plans like BCP, DRP, and to test those plans to make sure that if the cyber incident hits you, then you have those plans that are active and that are working, and then you can continue to supply your customer or to run your business while getting hit and managing this recovery. Managing recovery and manage your cyber incidents, because when the cyber incidents will hit you, you will need, if it's a major incident and if you're DORA impacted by DORA, you will need to declare those to the regulators with the full list of fields and remediation techniques that you have applied. You will need also to do root cause analysis. So managing cyber incidents will be pretty crucial. And as the cyber menace is evolving, this is something that is dynamic. Well, you need to improve your framework because new risks will come up. New controls will need to be implemented. You will need to audit also the whole framework to make sure that it's still relevant and that it is fit for purpose for the menace of tomorrow. Michael, when you see those steps, do you think that's that's quite something that you see within your mission with clients? I mean, how easy is it to climb this ladder of cyber resilience?
It is I think these are all the right steps. And I think it's all very good. It's sort of like climbing Mount Everest sometimes. You have to tackle things in stages. And so you need to just be able to address each stage and be able to get to that stage and before you're ready for the next stage. But this provides that right foundation to build upon that gets to the monitor cyber resilience. And if you achieve that level 5 on this course and on this journey, I almost say there's a level 6, or maybe it's just the outcome of bringing all this together, but is that enabling cyber agility.
Yep.
Resilience is that ability to recover from a risk event. By definition, resilience is that elasticity of a substance, or in our case, a business process or a service to spring back into shape. Resilience is that, but we need that cyber agility. What's coming at the organization? What are the scenarios that can play out? How do we prepare the organization? What's the best path forward so that we can minimize cyber incidents and issues in the organization? To me, an outcome of all these 5 steps in this course is to actually have that end focus of enabling cyber agility, where the organization's much more agile in its competitive and business environment in the context of cyber to address what's coming at it.
Perfect. So cyber agility, step 6.
Or it's just an outcome.
It's just an outcome, yeah. So that will lead us to this.
Do all those 5 and cyber agility is achieved.
It's just the outcome. So that will be the arrow on the slide.
Yep.
So let's ask our audience, where are you in your cyber resilience journey? So we have prompted you with the 4 steps. So are you just beginning? Are you in the developing stage, or are you, established, or are you very advanced in your cyber resilience journey? So we'll leave you a few seconds to submit your votes, and that will be interesting to see if the figures that we get matches what we see on the field, on the battlefield in Europe, and you, Michael, in the US. By the way, in the US, do you see a lot of companies that are starting this cyber resilience journey? Is it a really hot topic as much as it is in Europe, or is it still not as important?
Europe is much more mature and ahead of the game. Where I'm seeing more traction on the U.S. is firms that have significant operations in Europe that have to respond to the European regulations and laws in this area.
And if I look into the result of the polls, well, I'm not really surprised. So most of people on the call today are just beginning or developing their strategy to cyber resilience, which is exactly what we see on the field when we speak to clients. Hopefully, we kind of give you ideas on how to tackle this cyber resilience journey. Well, the underlying theme of this ladder that you just saw is that this ladder needs a foundation, and you need to have a foundation that at the same time gives you an IT perspective with the visibility on the application, technology, networks, server, third-party vendors. So you need this IT component that is understanding by IT professional and cyber professional. And you need to map this IT component with the GRC component, which will make the connection with the process, the risk, the control, the policies, the incident, the action plan, and the continuity bits. But you need also to connect with the data, because of course, what we mentioned is that data is almost like the treasure now of companies. So you need to understand where your data is located, how is the data is classified, is it sensitive, what are the data flows between application and server, how does it work? But you need also to connect with the other sources, just like a CMDB, or you need to connect to retrieve vendor due diligence on cyber rating, your CVSS, etc. And you need to do all this into one platform that allows to have this common view of all the perspectives, so IT, GRC data in one unified repository. And that is what kind of Michael alluded when he mentioned Mega, is that historically Mega is a very strong, it's been leader for 14 years on the enterprise architecture field, so the IT side of things. But we're also leader in the GRC spectrum, leader at Chartis again this year. So we're very pleased with that. So we bring the connection between IT and GRC, and we have a data governance aspect, which allows you to connect all the data together. Michael, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I know that you survey a lot of vendors out there. Do you see many vendors that can have this whole view and connect all the dots like Mega?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I mean, Mega definitely is it delivers on all these cylinders, where a lot of the other vendors out there, solution providers, provide aspects of this that you'd sort of have to link together to provide the view that Mega provides. Mega brings this aspect of IT, GRC, data, and the external integration of content and other elements together. I would almost think that there's another puzzle piece, a fifth one in this, on the business itself. You mentioned process on the right, but processes, services, the objectives of the organization, all that comes into play here too. So you can almost add a fifth piece that Mega delivers very well on, better than others out there in the industry, to provide a good platform to enable enterprise risk and resilience, including the cyber risk and resilience aspects of it.
And that's an excellent segue into this slide that I wanted to share with you, Michael, because I know you're a big fan of business process modeling, and you know that with Mega we do business processing. And what is interesting is that we have a couple of clients that are starting their cyber resilience journey by documenting their critical important functions, so their critical processes, and using Mega to link directly into the process modeling, the IT asset to operation, the cyber risk, cyber control, the data that is being used. And all these advantages of using a process modeling. And I was wondering, because if you look at for instance, the DORA regulation, and I'm sure even the OCC regulation on the OCC and the SEC regulation, there is nowhere mentioned that you need to document your processes to have a strong cyber resilience management. But what we see on the ground is that a lot of customers start with documenting your process. I mean, is this something that you would recommend, or what's your thought on this?
I wholeheartedly recommend documenting your processes. I mean, it's ironic to me if somebody comes out and says, documenting processes isn't spelled out in the regulation. But if you actually look at it, how would you do it if you didn't?
Yep.
I mean, to address resilience requires understanding of business processes and how they work and function, business services, what assets are involved, what data is involved, what's the flow of the process. Any type of risk or resilience, any type of business process, whether it's cyber or other aspects, requires a detailed understanding of and modeling of your business and how it operates and functions. And to me, the benefit of this is more than just meeting regulatory compliance. It enables you to document and understand how the business operates, and therefore also provides greater operational intelligence for your organization as well, beyond just mitigating risks, hazards, and harms.
Yeah, it's not just a compliance tool, but it's, I would say, a good managing tool of your business. It's how you do good business, basically, using those tools.
Yep.
And I guess that's about it for the presentation. We said we'll last 45 minutes. We're at 49 minutes, so we'll have a few time for questions and answers. So let's see if we have. Well, we have already 4 that are there, so I'm going to read them aloud. So what is your advice for companies based in regions like Africa, South Africa, specifically that interact with global entities that are underpinned by stringent cyber regulatory frameworks? How do they ensure astute business interaction? It's true that we didn't mention that much Africa, South Africa, in terms of regulation. I don't know, Michael, if you're aware of any regulation that are on those fields. But
I know that South Africa's got an accountability regime like UKSMCR for accountability in these areas, but I'm not quite sure of the breadth of the regulation.
Yeah, but if I understand the question is that what is their advice for companies that are based in those regions and that interact with global entities that are subject to like DORA or the OCC or the SEC frameworks? What would you recommend? Because if it's a company that is I don't know the fields in the person that has the question, but if it's IT vendors and if it's used in a critical process for a bank or an insurance company, then they will have to abide by DORA or by other cyber resilience regulation, because they will have to be submitted to due diligence and also to IT audits from their counterparts. So, my gut feeling on this is that they will need also to abide to those stringent cybersecurity rules. I don't know if you have another take on the question, Michael, from this.
Businesses want to do business with organizations that they can trust. Integrity and trust has become critical. And so an organization in Africa that's doing business with European organizations on this is best aligned to adopt similar approaches and themes that they have to be able to provide that greater level of trust, transparency, and integrity.
Perfect. We have another question on what strategies or framework can facilitate communication and alignment between IT and business. So I was thinking maybe of the frameworks like the NIST. I don't know if you're familiar with those, Michael, that they're a good starting base to facilitate IT and cyber risk management and link it to the business. Do you see any other? Or CIS?
What was that question?
What strategies or frameworks can facilitate communication between IT, cyber, and business?
Yeah, there's a variety. Some people are using like the FAIR methodology or a lightweight version of the FAIR methodology for risk quantification and themes to the business. And I mentioned bow tie risk analysis, but obviously there's, and those are just more methodologies and assessment frameworks. But being able to engage the business is absolutely critical.
And I think we have one more question. And I think that, again, it's more for you, Michael. In your experience, what are some successful approaches for fostering a culture of cross-functional collaboration between IT and cybersecurity teams with the business? Well, that relates to the whole siloed discussion that we had between business and IT. So I don't know if you have tips. Obviously, one of the tips could be to use a tool like Mega, but what other tools?
Yeah. To me, it gets down to first, the vision and mission statement of what you're trying to accomplish. If what we're trying to accomplish is just meeting the letter of the law, like a regulatory requirement, it becomes tactical, not strategic. To me, organizations need to embrace this idea of enterprise, operational, and cyber resilience together to be able to say, we're here for the business to provide value to the business. And ultimately, that's what Mega delivers is better run business. If you understand your business and how it operates from both, the processes and services, as well as the dependency on the cyber and digital aspects of that, better understood business allows you to better run that business and gives you not only risk and compliance information, but operational intelligence information. And this is what I'm outlining, what I call GRC 6.0. I've defined 6 generations of GRC technology, but GRC 6.0 is that business integrated GRC. How do we bake and build GRC into business and understanding of business processes and objectives within those processes to actually provide operational intelligence and value to the business, where risk and compliance and control is still important, but it's almost a byproduct of that.
Well, thank you for sharing this those tips for the question that, and I think that's yeah. I'm looking if there are any more questions. I think we have covered them all. So, Michael, I'm going to thank you again for spending those time with us and to share those insights. It's always, super enriching, at least for me, and I'm sure for our audience. We really appreciate your inputs on this. And I'm sure we will see you in another webcast with Mega. So with that said, I'm going to share everyone a very happy rest of the day and speak to you soon. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Michael, again.
Thank you.